The Middle East was once a battlefield where kings and warriors fought for control of the Holy Land. But there was one man no one could stop. A leader who united kingdoms, crushed Crusader armies, and ruled with justice and honor. His name? Saladin. For centuries, no one could tame Gaza, Jerusalem, and the sacred lands until he arrived. While his enemies massacred cities and burned temples, Saladin took the path of strategy and diplomacy, proving that war is not won by the sword alone. But how did this unknown Kurdish warrior rise to become the most powerful figure in medieval Islam? How did a single man hold back the Crusaders, rival kingdoms, and even the legendary Richard the Lionheart? And more importantly, what can we learn from him today? Because in times of war and chaos, understanding the story of Saladin means understanding the power of true leadership. Stay until the end, because this is not just another story about battles. This is the journey of the man who changed the fate of the Middle East forever. The historical context. In an era where the fate of the Holy Land was decided at the edge of a sword, a man was born who would change history forever. In the year 1137, deep in the heart of what is now Iraq, a child entered the world, Yusuf ibn Ayyub, later known as Saladin. But he was not just another warrior. He was the architect of an empire, a commander with vision, and a ruler who understood that justice was a weapon as powerful as steel. His world was a battlefield where crusades shaped kingdoms, and the concept of honor was sealed in blood. From a young age, Saladin was immersed in a world of war and rivalry, where today's conqueror could be tomorrow's defeated. But what made him different? What turned him into the legend we know today? Unlike what many might assume, Saladin was not born with a sword in his hand, but with a sharp mind. Educated in mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy, he understood the secrets of war, but also those of diplomacy. He knew that ruling was not just about conquest, but about unity. Islam at that time was fragmented, and threats came from all sides. Christian kingdoms from the West, internal conflicts between Sunnis and Shiites, and the ambitions of other Muslim leaders. In the middle of this turmoil, Saladin rose to power. But before he could become the Lord of Gaza and Jerusalem, he had to prove he was more than just a soldier. His journey to power had only just begun. Rise to power. No one becomes a conqueror without facing trials. Saladin was no exception. His path to power began under the guidance of his uncle, Asad ad-Din Shirkuh, a fierce warrior and brilliant strategist who served the powerful Nur ad-Din, ruler of Syria. It was an age of chaos, where justice was often decided by the sword, and Saladin had to learn quickly. He entered the world of war at a young age, following his uncle on military campaigns, but he was not seen as a natural warrior. He was a man of study, discipline, and deep thought, more drawn to strategy than reckless bravery. However, when fate placed him on the front lines, he proved he could be both. His greatest test came in 1169, when Saladin and his uncle were sent to Egypt under the orders of Nur ad-Din. At that time, Egypt was controlled by the crumbling Fatimid Caliphate, a Shiite dynasty plagued by intrigue and betrayal. Shirkuh's mission was clear: seize control of the caliphate and ensure that Sunni rule was restored. After a brutal campaign, they succeeded. But fate had an unexpected twist. Shirkuh died suddenly, and in his place, Saladin, at only 31 years old, was named Vizier of Egypt. It was a shock to many. A Kurdish outsider from a military lineage now sitting on one of the most powerful thrones in the Islamic world? Many believed he wouldn't last long, but they didn't know Saladin. Strategy and conquests. A true conqueror does not simply wield a sword. He knows when and how to use it. No one understood this better than Saladin. As vizier of Egypt, he quickly consolidated his power, appointing allies and eliminating betrayals before they could take root. In 1171, he dissolved the Fatimid Caliphate, ending centuries of Shiite rule and restoring Sunni control under the Abbasid Caliphate, based in Baghdad. But Saladin did not want to be just the ruler of Egypt. He had a greater mission: to unify the Islamic world and drive the Crusaders out of the Holy Land. To accomplish this, he needed more than just military strength. He needed vision. With patience and strategy, he secured control over Syria and Mesopotamia, defeating rival Muslim factions and building a cohesive empire. But the moment that would turn him into a legend came in 1187, when he finally faced the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin. Under the scorching Palestinian sun, he lured the Christian army into a deadly trap. Thirsty, exhausted, and surrounded, the Crusaders were annihilated. Among the prisoners was Reynald of Chatillon, one of Saladin's most despised enemies, notorious for his attacks on Muslim pilgrims. Without hesitation, Saladin personally executed Reynald, an act of justice and vengeance that demonstrated his strength. With the Crusaders crushed, nothing stood in his way. Jerusalem was next. The siege and surrender of Jerusalem. If there was one prize more coveted than any other in the war between Christians and Muslims, that prize was Jerusalem. For the Crusaders, the city was the sacred heart of their faith. For Saladin, it was a matter of honor, justice, and jihad. Retaking the city was not just a military victory, but a religious duty. And so, on September 20th, 1187, he laid siege to the city with a disciplined and determined army. Jerusalem was poorly defended, but the Crusaders would not surrender without a fight. Led by Balian of Ibelin, they resisted with all their strength, trusting that reinforcements would arrive. But reinforcements never came. For 12 days, catapults rained down stones upon the walls, as Saladin tightened his grip on the city. When a breach was finally made, the city was on the brink of collapse. But unlike the Crusaders in 1099, who had slaughtered Muslims and Jews without mercy, Saladin refused to allow a bloodbath. He accepted Balian's surrender under one condition: Christians could leave peacefully, but only if they paid a ransom. Many could not afford it, and in an act of mercy, Saladin allowed thousands to leave without payment. Jerusalem was once again under Muslim rule, and the flag of Saladin flew over the Dome of the Rock. But this victory would not go unanswered. In the West, a king was preparing for war, a king who would become Saladin's greatest rival. Conflicts and agreements with the Crusaders. The fall of Jerusalem struck Christian Europe like a thunderclap. The Pope called for a new crusade, and the kings of England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire answered the call. Thus began the Third Crusade, fought between 1189 and 1192. Leading the Crusader forces was a man as legendary as Saladin himself, Richard the Lionheart. Unlike previous Crusader commanders, Richard was a born warrior, known for his bravery and relentless aggression on the battlefield. When he finally arrived in the Middle East, he did not come to negotiate. He came to avenge Jerusalem. And Saladin knew that he was about to face the most formidable opponent of his life. The battles between the two were fierce and unrelenting. In 1191, Richard captured Acre and ordered the execution of thousands of Muslim prisoners. Saladin retaliated without hesitation. That same year, their armies clashed at the Battle of Arsuf, where Richard secured a decisive victory. But it was not enough to march directly on Jerusalem. For months, the two leaders tested not only their military might, but also their diplomacy. And surprisingly, a mutual respect emerged between them. When Richard fell ill, Saladin sent his personal physician and fresh fruit to help him recover. In the end, neither could defeat the other. In 1192, they signed a treaty. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim rule, but Christian pilgrims would be allowed to visit the city freely. And so, war gave way to an uneasy peace. But Saladin's health was failing. Death and legacy. After years of war, Saladin was exhausted. His body could no longer withstand the weight of the battles he had fought, and in February of 1193, he fell gravely ill. His empire stretched across vast lands. His reputation was legendary, but his fortune was non-existent. He had donated nearly all of his wealth to the poor and those in need, a final act that revealed the true character of the man behind the warrior. On March 4th of 1193 in Damascus, he took his last breath, and thus the greatest Muslim leader of his time passed away, not on the battlefield, but in his bed, surrounded by those who respected and admired him. His legacy, however, never died. Even Christians revered him, and Dante Alighieri would later mention him in the Divine Comedy as one of the few Muslim leaders respected in the West. In the Islamic world, he became a symbol of justice, honor, and courage. His dynasty, the Ayyubids, would rule for several more generations, but Saladin's name would echo through the centuries. His tomb in Damascus remains a pilgrimage site, visited by those who recognize that he was not just a warrior, not just a king. He was a man who changed history forever. But what can we learn from him? What made Saladin such a legendary leader? Was it his strength on the battlefield? His ability to unite divided peoples? Or his justice, even toward his enemies? The truth is, it was all of these things combined. He proved that a true conqueror is not just the one who builds an empire, but the one whose legacy endures for centuries. He did not fight for land alone, but for a vision, a unified and powerful Islamic world, standing strong against external threats. But what about you? In the face of your own challenges, are you playing to win, or simply reacting to the world around you? What can we learn from Saladin about strategy, resilience, and leadership? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more epic stories like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video. History is full of lessons that few truly understand. Do not be just a spectator of the past. Discover what made these leaders unforgettable.